She thought leaving me would be her golden ticket. Her smile as she signed the divorce papers looked like that of someone who was already counting the money in her head. What she didn't suspect was that she had been witnessing my transformation. Without realizing it, she had watched me go from an ordinary man to a millionaire ghost right before her eyes. I felt no sadness or resentment when she stamped her signature. I felt something much colder, a perfect calm like the one that precedes a storm you know will destroy everything in its path. Clara and I had been married for 7 years. From the outside, we were the perfect picture. Trips twice a year. Family dinners full of rehearsed smiles and that calculated affection that only serves to deceive others. No one saw what happened behind the closed door of our house. A silence that grew like mold on the walls. A distance so thick it could be cut with a knife. I knew she had been cheating on me for a long time. Her lover was her personal trainer, a guy with too much white smile and few neurons. I didn't confront her. There was no need. While she entertained herself with her game of lies, I was tracing mine in silence, one that required more patience than any passing deception. Clara always called me predictable, as if it were an insult disguised as a compliment. I had a mundane job in tech support, a discreet house, and a routine that anyone could memorize in a week. She laughed when she said it, believing that stability was synonymous with weakness. But what she never understood is that predictable was just the mask that suited me to show her. By day, I continued the role of the bored employee. At night, I locked myself in my study to work on something she could never suspect. A tech startup that started as a hobby and exploded during the pandemic. I kept it invisible to her, like a marked card in the sleeve of a patient player. I created a company. I reinvested every cent. I never mixed money from my business with our personal accounts. When she asked for the divorce with a tox test in hand and an arrogant smile on her face, my net worth was already approaching $12 million. I think we both know this is for the best, she said, sure that she was about to destroy me. I just nodded, not a word more. In her eyes, I saw a spark of surprise. It wasn't the reaction she expected, and that was just the first blow. I accepted the divorce with surgical coldness. There were no pleas or reproaches, just a dry nod that unsettled her. She thought my silence was resignation, when in reality it was the sound of the trap closing slowly. For weeks I saw her celebrate on her social networks photos of expensive wines, dinners with friends, and a new man who always appeared in strategic angles to avoid showing his face completely, as if hiding it erased the smell of betrayal she carried. I saw her strut as if she were winning, while the guy who picked her up a few blocks from home thought my cameras hadn't seen him. I said nothing. Why? There is something more devastating than anger, indifference. I let her enjoy her false triumph. I let her believe she had won the game. That would hurt more when everything came crashing down at once. The day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom was impregnated with a metallic aroma of old air conditioning and the expensive perfume that Clara had sprayed on like armor. She entered walking as if it were her own red carpet, fitted dress, heels that echoed on the floor, and that smile that said she already felt owner of the house, of my money, and of her new life. She even winked at me from the other end of the room, as if we still shared some secret. I just looked at her, without blinking. I took a seat next to my lawyer, a man with a stone face and a low voice like a shot with a silencer. In silence, we reviewed the documents that would change everything. Meanwhile, she flirted with victory, convinced that in a matter of minutes, she would leave there with half my world in her hands. The irony was almost poetic to me. She had spent years seeing my life as boring, without noticing that beneath the surface there was machinery in motion, one that she never saw coming. Her lawyer was the first to speak. With a confident voice, he accused that I might be hiding assets. The declared salary of Mr. Munoz does not match his lifestyle, he said, convinced that he had smelled blood. The judge looked up and asked me for my documents. My lawyer handed them over with the calm of someone who knows the game is won before it starts. Not a word, just a slight sound of paper sliding over wood. The judge scanned the pages, raised an eyebrow, and spoke. His voice echoed in the room like a hammer. Mr. Munoz owns and operates Munoz Systems, LLC, a technology company founded before the marriage. His current net worth amounts to $118 million. I saw Clara's world collapse in slow motion. The smile died on her lips, her pupils dilated, and her hands began to tremble. For the first time in years, she was speechless. The silence in the room was so thick, I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Clara looked at me as if she had never seen me before. Her mouth open, unable to articulate a word, was the exact portrait of someone who has just realized that they were playing cards without knowing that the game was already over. I wanted to memorize that expression. Incredulity mixed with fear, a masterpiece of her own arrogance shattered. She tried to speak, stammering something incoherent, but how she stuttered, looking for support from her lawyer, who now avoided looking at her. He had no answer, because the truth was simple and brutal. Everything I built I did in the dark, far from her radar, with the precision of someone who knew exactly when to reveal his hand. She, on the other hand, was naked before reality she could not control. The judge continued reading. The business was created before the marriage, with separate accounts and without any contribution from Mrs. Munoz. Each word was a dry blow, like hammer blows on a newly placed tombstone. Then, the final thrust. According to the prenuptial agreement signed in 2016, the company and its assets are the exclusive property of Mr. Munoz. Clara blinked several times, as if that way she could erase the scene, but there was no turning back. I saw how her hands, so firm when signing the divorce papers days before, now sought something to hold on to. The judge barely looked up to confirm his ruling. There was no legal basis to grant her even a cent of the company. Her prize was reduced to half of the shared account, little more than crumbs, and the car that she herself had chosen. Nothing more, no house, no alimony, no that fortune she already took for granted. Her breathing quickened, her trembling lips trying to find a way out. She looked at me now without pride or mockery, only with pleading. We were together 7 years. She said almost in a whisper, as if that phrase had some magical power to rewrite the law or my memory. I looked at her coldly. 7 years in which I worked in silence, building an empire that she never bothered to see, busy as she was with her cheap betrayal and her fantasies of superiority. The judge gave the last gavel strike. Case closed. That was the final sentence. Clara said nothing, just gathered her things in a silence that weighed more than any scream. As she left the room, her heels sounded hollow, devoid of that confidence with which she had entered. I saw her hunchback disappear through the door and knew that I had just witnessed something more than a divorce. I had attended the fall of an inflated ego to destruction. When I left the courthouse, the afternoon was cloudy, as if the sky reflected the emotional weather I had just witnessed. Claire was a few meters away, standing by the curb, looking at her phone aimlessly, with that expression of someone looking for an exit that doesn't exist. Neither her lover nor her friends were there to pick up the pieces. Just a harsh silence, the kind that isn't broken even with tears. I stopped for a moment, lit a cigarette, and watched her without her seeing me. I felt no compassion. By then, any trace of empathy had been ripped out years before, replaced by the certainty that some deserved to sink in the holes they dig themselves. In that moment, I understood that true revenge didn't need to be loud or dramatic. It wasn't the screams or public humiliations. It was that emptiness in her eyes upon realizing that everything she planned was slipping through her fingers. As I walked to my car, I remembered the endless nights in front of the monitor, programming lines of code until my hands hurt. The cold coffee, the sleepless dawns, the calculated risks that she never knew I took. Each sacrifice now weighed differently. They weren't just memories. They were silent weapons that I had sharpened in secret, while she thought I lived to pay bills and be her boring shadow. I got into my black sedan, a vehicle so discreet that it would never have betrayed my success. I drove to my real home, a penthouse in the city center, one I never mentioned, bought with money that never touched our joint accounts. From its windows, the city looked like a board of lights and shadows, a perfect stage to watch the crowd collapse without making noise. I poured an expensive whiskey of those I never tasted in her presence. I leaned on the balcony railing and lit another cigarette. From that height, the world seemed different, smaller, easier to dominate. I thought of Clara, probably locked in some borrowed apartment, calling that lover who now would understand that there was no gold in her hands, only smoke. I laughed, a dry sound that disappeared into the night wind. That night, I slept for the first time in years without the weight of her shadow, without veiled reproaches, without coldness disguised as routine. Just the distant murmur of the city and the certainty that I had won without firing a single shot. In the silence of that penthouse among glass and neon lights, I understood that I had stopped being the man she knew, and the best of all, she never saw it coming. Weeks later, Clara stopped posting on social media. The photos of her lover disappeared. The ostentatious dinners vanished, and her profile became an empty wall. I heard from an acquaintance that she had lost a car due to lack of payments, and that she now rented a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. The irony was perfect. That woman who dreamed of a life of luxury now settled for 4 cheap walls and an old bed. Her silence was more eloquent than any plea. My name, on the other hand, began to appear in headlines, interviews in business magazines, invitations to conferences, podcasts talking about the visionary mind behind Mignot Systems. The same people who once considered me the boring guy now asked to hear my words as if they were gospel. I never responded to those social calls. I didn't seek validation. My success was never for them. It was a silent war, personal, and it had ended with an absolute victory. I met someone new at one of those conferences. Her name was Elena, a woman with intelligent eyes and a quiet smile, nothing like Clara's theatrical gestures. She didn't care about the figures in my accounts or the headlines with my face. She talked about books, art, plans that went beyond immediacy. Being with her was like opening the windows in a room that had been closed for years. Fresh air, clean, without a trace of poison. Sometimes, when the city sleeps and only the lights of distant buildings remain, I think about how I got here. Every betrayal, every indifferent look from Clara, every night of insomnia in front of the screen were bricks in the wall that separated me from her. I didn't build my success just out of ambition. I did it for survival, and when surviving becomes art, it also becomes a weapon. I understood it late, but in time. I saw Clara only once after the divorce. It was in an ordinary cafe, one of those that smell of hopelessness. Mid-morning, her appearance was different. Cheap makeup, worn clothes, lost look. When she saw me, she tried to smile, but her lips barely moved. I approached, greeted her politely, and ordered my coffee as if she were any stranger. In her eyes, I saw something I will never forget. Regret mixed with the certainty that that bridge was already reduced to ashes. There were no words of apology or pleas, just that dense, uncomfortable silence that we both understood. She finished her coffee quickly, stood up, and left without looking back. I saw her disappear into the crowd, small, irrelevant, like a shadow that no longer had any weight in my life. In that moment, I knew I didn't need more proof. I had won the most elegant war of all, the one fought without blood or noise, only with patience and strategy. Today, as I observe the city from my penthouse, I think of that phrase I repeated to myself when everything seemed stagnant. Build in the darkness. I did, and when I turned on the light, what I saw was not just wealth or freedom. It was a different man, tempered by the fire of betrayal and the cold of silence. Clara now lives with what she lost, and I with what I built. That is the essence of my story in a world that underestimates the silent ones. Sometimes the strongest blow is not having to raise your voice. Yeah,